The Air Force is a very special branch in any military force. The fighter pilot is the elite of all the forces, but despite this there is a pilot who was considered the best air fighter throughout history. He made miraculous victories without attending not even a single lesson in aviation institutes. Welcome to you. But before we start, if you are still new in the channel, don't forget to make a script and click on the bell to get our videos to you first. Solo, by Brecht H. Tofen. Learn most flying through observation. Learn to read maps, determine locations and drop bombs. He was also a pilot whose skills are legendary. His talent is raw, not only in aviation. He was born on February 5, 1892 AD. His father was an officer in the cavalry, and it was very clear to Manfred that he would remain a genius child, and 10 years ago I learned how to use and dismantle weapons and learned some martial arts. He was also distinguished in horse riding, and estimated that he won a number of awards in competitions for the age groups who are older than him. From a young age, his situation was decorated with the skulls of animals he hunted. Therefore, he decided to enter a military academy when he was only 11 years old, and by the end of the 9 years of study at the academy, he was qualified to join the German army within the elite forces, and shortly after joining the Great War broke out, which will then be known in history as the First World War. But was he still having bad luck? He insisted on the worst war in history, or was this from good luck because his name remains throughout history? Manfred joined the army in the 1st Cavalry, and this was also one of the signs of talent that a modern recruit enters along the 1st Cavalry. But despite this, he proved his worth during the combat operations that he was assigned to, and estimated that he takes the Iron Cross medal. And despite the successes he achieved, the destinies were arranging a different place for him. After a period of battles, the armies began to hold up in the trenches. The fighting turns into a war of attrition. In this period, the cavalry was almost as busy as a war, and most of its personnel were divided on the various branches of the army, and Elie continued in the cavalry. He was assigned simple tasks such as transporting mail or transporting supplies to fighters. He was one of those who remained for this kind of business. Our friend, Manfred, but nevertheless, Manfred McCanch is satisfied with his place, and he was trying with all force if he moved to the new Air Force in the Army. Warplanes began at the end of 1911, meaning not 2 years, 3 before the war, and the tasks were limited to reconnaissance, but almost means there is no need called air combat, air protection, or all this talk. So much so that the first female pilot to fall into an air clash was after a full 70 days of continuous flights of hundreds of planes to engage only one of them. José France, the French pilot whose name has been immortalized in history, was also the first to shoot down a female pilot in an air combat operation. The downed victim was a German Air Force pilot. Our friend, Manfred, remained the first thing that saw people cheering for José France. In every part of the world, the story came to his mind that he must remain a pilot, but the subject needs training and measurements. Of course, the planes at the time were primitive, and the subject did not require complex training like now. But in the end, theoretical and practical training was necessary in order to understand the navigator's style. And because of his honorable history and the rank of his father, he was transferred to the Air Force in 1915, but of course when I moved he was assigned to ground missions, but 2 weeks after he joined the Air Force and said, "I want to fly, Salvation I trained," they tested me, and after his stubbornness, and after he proved his health efficiency and some theoretical information, they released him as an air controller in a reconnaissance plane in June 1915, and then preferred 6 months to train, until he remained the commander of a reconnaissance aircraft. At the beginning of 1916, and there is no horoscope except for the subject, remained the heart of clowning acrobatic movements in the air and parades and madness of the explanation of the illusion. What are you doing? Learn about the capabilities of the pilot that I am driving. But in fact, Elie was still doing solo was new even to professionals, Everyone was talking about him and his madness in the air to the extent that his name reached the veteran pilot, Osbald Boelke, and Elly was looking for fighters for his squadron. Indeed, our owner, Wanfred, was chosen and his dream came true after he, Boelke, included him in the fighter squadron. As expected, Manfred was disappointing, and the first female pilot was shot down on September 17, 1916. One of the most famous terms for fighter pilots is the term ace, or fit Reis, a term that expresses a professional pilot who has won 5 air battles. When he knew this story, he told them 5, but he had only asked Nona, and within 6 months he had shot down 16 Allied planes in order to remain one of the few who deserved the best medal in the entire German army. In a short period, the legend of Manfred spread, and everyone began to call him the Red Baron or the Red Satan. And his fame is that he almost kept working until he wanted to paint the plane in red. I mean, he says to you, "I am the one who can defeat me, let him come." Curiously, his commanders also agreed to this crazy idea and considered it an idea that would scare the second pilots and cause them panic. The idea worked, and the formation that was led by a solo was known as the circus formation, which was a suitable name for the acrobatics and performances he was doing. Indeed, the Red Baron turned to the German propaganda machine's favorite performance, and as soon as the enemy planes saw the red plane and the formation of the circus Elly and Ra, they were afraid in a state of panic and decided to escape, but even escape was useless. The Red Baron continued to shoot down the planes, his victories reached miraculous numbers, and his house was filled with medals and cups. After the fame of the Red Baron and the frightening reputation that has reached the enemies, no one uses his name. No one can call him anything but the Baron or the Devil, but after the accident that happened on June 7, 1917 AD, everyone agreed on the name of the Red Devil. On this day, a stray bullet penetrated his skull and caused him blindness and temporary paralysis. Of course, at this time, there was no autopilot, rescue chair, or any need for this talk, and everyone thought that it was the last seconds in the life of the legend, but suddenly and inexplicably, 800 meters before the plane hit the ground, for a whole month in the hospital, he preferred to be treated, and of course the doctors prevented him from flying again, but as soon as he could stand on his feet, he told them, "I want to fly. Are you able to talk about how to fly?" He told them that I want to fly and I also want to fly on the new model of aircraft, and of course without the rest of what is trained on the new plane, regardless of the logic, he flew again and preferred to continue in the war and continued to shoot down the planes. By April 1918, his air victories had been documented at 80. No matter how dreadful the skill and reputation of the Red Balloon, he is first and foremost a human being. On April 21, 1918, in the last months of the war, the Red Baron was carrying out sorties over northern France, and during what was chasing the British pilot and Alfred May, he was surprised by a hail of bullets coming from the ground. In Hatta was supposed to be a friendly atmosphere, but the German forces had withdrawn from it and occupied by a regiment of Australian soldiers, and because his plane is red and distinctive, the soldiers of course knew who he was. They punctured the plane with bullets and the plane crashed and the Red Baron died at the age of 25, but 2 of them were only 2 years he was a pilot, but 2 years were enough to make countless books and works of art.